All right, folks. Every Forged in the Barrens card has been revealed, and some pretty crazy ones. Sorry for the delay on this one. I was a little busy this morning, as some of you might know. But we're going to talk about these, and frankly, I'm going to go really quickly in this video. I thought about maybe doing like 4 or 5 more videos and stretching it out, but ultimately we got theory crafting decks and patch notes and other things to discuss. So we're unfortunately going to have to go through these pretty quickly. That's just the way it has to be given the reveal schedule. So that said, let's just jump into things. Whirling Combatant, new Warrior Frenzy setup card here. Battlecry and Frenzy deal 1 damage to all of their minions. It's 4 mana, 2/6. I actually think this is a pretty cool card. Even if you're not like activating your own frenzies, this is still a whirlwind on a pretty reasonably statted body, and then also has its own frenzy effect as well, of course. So maybe dealing 2 damage to your opponent's stuff. Nice recovery tool. And then, of course, also an enabler for your own frenzy sort of cards, or bringing it back off Sourfang, those sorts of things. Just looks like a really solid mid-game body with a tool set that does a few different things. Looks like a good card. I'm going to say 4 stars. And yes, we're going to do the star reviews along with the cards. The Stone Maul Anchorman here, 5 mana, 4/5 pirate with Rush and Frenzy. Draw a card. This is kind of what we were looking for with all Frenzy cards, having the Rush aspect to make sure it's more easily readily triggered, the Frenzy effect that is. And this one in particular seems awesome. Solid Rush body with this card draw upside, some pirate synergies on there as well. Great card for something like Sourfang to follow up with. So this looks like another really nice mid-game Frenzy body along with our last card. Another good card. I'm going to say 4 stars. So next up here's Field Contact. Pretty cool rogue card. 3 mana, 3/2. After you play a Battlecry or combo card, draw a card, which makes this a nice little engine. Kind of like Whirl Kick a little bit, but cards in your deck instead of randomly generated combo cards. Maybe not as guaranteed to chain and pop off, but still I think pretty likely to do exactly that. And it seems like a nice card for Rogue to pull good stuff out of their deck that they are running anyway. So they're only a 3 mana overhead. This seems like a nice card draw tool for sure. 4 stars. Moving on to the Spawn Pool Forager here. A 1 mana 1/2 Murloc for Shaman, kicking off Murloc Shaman as a potential archetype. It's got a Death Rattle, summon a 1/1 Tiny Fin. And I mean, yeah, this is a great 1-drop. We've seen 1/2s with any kind of upside make a lot of sense. 1/3s, of course, as well. This is a Murloc with a Murloc sticky body left behind. There's some Murloc conditional triggers if you have a Murloc on board, so this seems perfect for setting up those Murloc board starts early in the game. It's once again a 4-star card. This is the 4-star expansion. It's 4 stars in the Barrens. I think they misnamed it. Moving on to the Earth Revenant here, a 4 mana 2/6 elemental for Shaman. Taunt and Battlecry deal 1 damage to all enemy minions. So really nice defensive body here in the mid game at 6 health, and an upside that might be great to slow down some aggro decks, chip off some Divine Shields. 1 health minions, of course, tend to linger around as well. So this feels like a great way to keep elemental chains going, which are going to matter as we see some other very big payoff elemental style cards. So, there's some risk there's not enough elemental to hit that critical mass of making elemental decks good, but nonetheless, I think this card's pretty darn solid. I'm going to say 4 stars. Good God, I think this is going to be another 4-star card. I promise the whole review is not 4 stars, but this is Lillypad Lurker, a 5 mana 4/5 elemental shaman card here. Battlecry, if you played an elemental last turn, transform an enemy minion into a 0/1 frog with taunt. Now this is a much bigger payoff for elemental shaman, and really probably one of the reasons you're going to want to run the deck. So this could almost maybe venture on 5 stars. But I don't have enough faith in Elemental Shaman to really push it to the 5-star mark. Notably, this is just a Hex with a 1 mana kind of tax that's a 4/5 body and an elemental synergy on top of that. So really, you're pretty happy here because Hex at 4 mana is a sensibly played card at 4 mana, and to get all this kind of bonus upside on it is fantastic, making Lillypad Lurker a very strong, almost 5-star, but still yet a 4-star card. Oh, thank God. Okay, I don't think this one's gonna be 4 stars. It's Apothecary's Caravan. 2 mana 1/3. The start of your turn, summon a 1-cost minion from your deck. So this is one of the Caravan cards. They all have like start of turn triggers, and then they do something. In this case, you get a 1-cost minion from your deck. Clearly, that's cool. You get to get some tempo on board and, thin out your deck so that you have better stuff left over in your deck. But ultimately, the start of turn trigger makes me really nervous on this. Like, yes, of course, it can stick around, but you have so much rush, so many cheap spell removal tools. I think a vast majority of the time this will get removed far too easily, and you would rather have spent your stats and mana and early tempo plays on something that is more stat based and something that's just cementing a board more than this card, which is got all this upside, but it takes a long time to realize. So unfortunately, I think the Apothecary's Caravan is probably only a 2-star card. Moving on to Void Flayer here, 4 mana, 3/4, Battlecry. For each spell in your hand, deal 1 damage to a random enemy minion. So more spell-based triggers here for Priest. This one is kind of a Reno or Dark Skies almost, but only enemy minions, of course. And that makes it a potentially very interesting tempo swing. If you have, 3, 4, 5 spells in hand and you play the Void Flayer, then boom, you're going to light up your opponent's board. Often, clearing a mid-sized threat probably while developing a 3/4 body of your own, which feels really cool. Now, there is some downside and risk here, right? If you don't have enough spells, you have too many minions, the balance is off, or you've already had to play some spells. This does become pretty bad pretty quickly. I think it falls off kind of hard. The upside's there, but I don't think this is totally crazy, and it is definitely restricted in the kinds of decks that are going to be able to play this one successfully. So I'm going to limit Void Flayer here to only 3 stars, which is tough because it's such a big tempo swing, but I think consistency will really hurt this one. Moving on to Power Word Fortitude here for Priest. Another spell synergy buff here, 8 mana, 3/5, costs 1 less for each spell in your hand. So the idea here, of course, getting this to probably 4 or less mana to feel really good, get that kind of Blessing of Kings or better feel for this one. And, that's going to happen, of course. Like, there's going to be instances, but it's the same problem with Void Flayer. I think it's actually a little bit harder than we think to keep spells in hand as Priest. Of course, there's cards like Sethic that help you create chains, but you're often wanting to play those spells. I think this is often going to fall in the 8 to 5 mana range where it feels good. And it even did, if you are this deck that's running a ton of crazy spells, I think you're probably more defensive, you're more control oriented, and having a buff like this probably isn't super advantageous to your deck. So even if you do have a ton of spells, I don't know if you care enough about Power Word Fortitude. So unfortunately, I think this is only a 2-star card. Next up, here's the Efficient Octobot for Rogue. And this card scares me a lot. It's a 2 mana 1/4. Frenzy, reduce the cost of cards in your hand by 1. I don't think that's going to be particularly difficult to activate. There's all kinds of little ping effects you can run. And then it's a huge discount to net, which means it might set up all kinds of crazy combo plays, or maybe just a really cheap way to get a minion on board and tempo out your next few plays as well. This one looks kind of nuts, kind of scary. I think I might actually give this card 5 stars. Next up here is Silverleaf Poison for Rogue, of course. Another poison, 2 mana. Give your weapon, after your hero attacks, draw a card. And I think this is cool because very often this could, just play it once and attack even on just your hero power, and it kind of cycles itself, which isn't an exciting play for 2 mana, but sometimes it's an acceptable one if you just need to get stuff moving through your hand. And then, of course, if you have multiple durability, even on your hero power, drawing 2 for 2 mana makes a lot more sense. And clearly, if you support this with the new, whatever the new poison support weapon is, or any other weapon with a ton of durability, then this becomes really, really good. Now, I don't have a ton of faith in like Poison Rogue as an archetype just because of the weapon's susceptibility to being removed. But I think this card exists beyond that as a pretty interesting way to use weapon attacks to cycle, and it could also exist in that poison world. So I'm going to say this one's actually pretty nice little 4-star card. Moving on to Wicked Stab here for Rogue. 2 mana ranked spell, deals 2 damage, and then it moves on to dealing 4 damage, and then moves on to dealing 6 damage, which is crazy. Most of these only increment by 1 damage at a time. This one increments so high, and that means at a base level, this isn't like terrible. It's not exciting, certainly, but sometimes you need to spend 2 mana to clear off a minion. That's fine. And then by the time you get into the mid game, this is already an Eviscerate that doesn't take a combo. And Eviscerate was a ridiculous card. Rogues always, of course, not always, often, of course, play to turn 5 or later. And usually you're playing the Eviscerates later in the game anyway when you're looking for lethals. So at 5 mana, this is absolutely crazy. And it looks like it's destroying a Piloted Shredder, which is fun. And then, of course, at 10 mana, it's even better than an Eviscerate. It's just 6 damage output for 2 mana. So this card looks very, very strong. I don't know if it's a 5-star card in the sense that it's not like, enabling an archetype like the Octobot could maybe set up some combo stuff, could be the real centerpiece for the deck. This is probably just a card that's played in almost every Rogue list. So I'm going to say still a really strong 4 stars just because of the way this is not likely to be the centerpiece for a deck. Moving on here to the Cabal Outfitter, 3-mana 3/3 battle cry and death rattle. Give another random friendly minion +1/+1. So a little bit of a zoo builder here, but unfortunately, I think it's actually a little bit too slow compared to a card like Wriggling Horror. You would rather have more of the value or the efficiency of the card baked into the effect than the stats itself, I think, because you want cheap follow-ups that push a ton of damage. Wriggling Horror is really good at that. Cabal Outfitter has a little bit too much of its value tied into its own stats here as a 3/3, and some of the stat buff is delayed on the Death Rattle, which, although it can be kind of annoying, usually that's just going to give your opponent the ability to work around it. So unfortunately, I think Cabal Outfitter actually feels a little bit slow for what Zoo is doing these days and how fast Hearthstone has become. So unfortunately, I'm going to say just a 2-star card. So next up here is the Barrens Scavenger. This is a really cool card. It's another Warlock empty deck synergy card. It's a 6-mana 6/6 with Taunt, and it costs 1 while your deck has 10 or fewer cards. So this whole little archetype is coming together, and I kind of believe in it. I'm sort of going out on a limb here to say I think this might just work. And we haven't even got to the big payoff card for it yet, because I think some of these cards are just really strong. 1-mana 6/6 is clearly quite good. We've seen with the Corrupt 6/6 taunt how good it can be to have a cheap taunt like that just swinging games, and it feels like this deck's going to be swinging games pretty hard. So I'm going to go ahead and say Barrens Scavenger is a 4-star card because I think it exists even outside of this like Fatigue Warlock. Just a control Warlock that gets late in the game and suddenly has a 1-mana 6/6 taunt to help swing, twisting another into 1-mana 6/6 without necessarily having to run a Corrupt package, which they might also be doing. Still feels really good. So another 4-star card. Moving on here to Bulk Up for Warrior. 2-mana spell. Give a random taunt minion in your hand +1/+1 and copy it. So a little bit of hand buff, but on a singular minion, but then also some resource too. So you can build out an extra taunt. And we saw like Morshan Elite, I believe it was, the summon a copy of yourself taunt, which if you hand buff that and then copy it, that's awesome. Then you get 2 of those. You got yourself quite a few little minions here actually reaping the benefit from this single buff. And of course, you can run multiples of these. So taunt hand buff sounds really cool. I don't know if this card goes quite far enough. It is true that warriors sometimes slower ones need ways to fill their early turns with a card like Bulk Up that could allow you to do that while generating resources. But I wonder if card draw is just going to be better because we got some pretty cool card draw tools. So absolutely a fine card. I just think one that's going to be hard to, out-compete some of the other options available to warrior. So only 3 stars. Moving on to the Outrider's Axe. This one is crazy good, I think. It's a 4-mana 3/3. And after hero attacks and kills a minion, draw a card. That is basically a ton of card draw potentially baked into this weapon. And certainly, an okay stat line as well still at 4 mana. We usually see like 4 attack weapons thrive at 4 mana, but 3 is enough. And there's a ton of 3 health or less minions lingering around, even in the mid game, where this will still get plenty of opportunities to swing. And of course, drawing 3 cards in a single card is awesome when it's already doing something pretty decent as a decently statted weapon. So yeah, this one just lines up from a math standpoint really well. I think a ton of warriors will utilize this. This is an easy 4-star card. Moving on to Ranker, it's a 4-mana spell, deal 2 damage to all minions, and gain 2 armor for each destroyed. So we got like a Holy Nova or Consecration alternative here for warrior. It's of course symmetrical, so it's hitting your own stuff, which could be bad, but could also sometimes be good because you could turn your own junk minions into armor. And this is a Holy Nova or a Consecration with, I think, a huge defensive upside, which is kind of amazing. It does have to kill them off to get that upside, but you're still going to net at least a few points of armor, I'm sure, every time, or whatever increment of even armor, 2, 4, 6, 8, etc. And sometimes you could even get like a ton of armor off of this, like a game-winning or stabilizing amount of armor against an aggro deck if they're not careful. So I think this is going to be a really valuable tool for any defensive warrior deck. This is once again a 4-star card. I'm going to have to move to the end of this set of cards to find some garbage ones. Here's actually a bad one. Let's just stick with this. The Far Watch Post, a 2-mana 2/4, can't attack. After your opponent draws a card, it costs 1 more up to 10. So here, a little bit of disruption, basically. Another one of the watch posts. We saw a couple others. This is the 3rd one. I think it's the only one as far as I saw when I previewed these real quickly. And I don't think it's very good, right? You're spending 2 mana to potentially punish a little bit of your opponent's mana, but you're paying 2 mana. And this has to go off twice to like kind of, be a net even there. And you're not going to make anything unplayable because it's going to cap at 10. You could occasionally slow down some key turns from your opponent. You know, they have a big AoE card or something, or a big, awesome, legendary they're trying to play. Maybe you slow it down by a turn or whatever, but ultimately you're not really doing that much off of this card, and you're kind of giving up maybe your early turn in the process, I think. So it's easy to kill at 4 health, like, not maybe on turn 2, but it's not like it's going to last the whole game or something. Eventually it's just kind of going to get chipped away for free, just tossed into an AoE or rush minion. So I don't really think it's worth giving up the slot in your deck and the mana you have to spend on this for what I would consider a pretty marginal upside in the long run. 2 stars. Arcane Luminary here for Mage, 3 mana, 4/3 elemental cards that didn't start in your deck cost 2 less, but not less than 1. So this is kind of crazy with stuff like Evocation or any deck that's generating a bunch of things. But the problem for me with Arcane Luminary is that you're paying this 3 mana tax to get it on board, which is already limiting your turn quite a bit. If you're also playing like an Evocation, that's already 5 mana locked up. And because this has the cap at 1 mana, or the minimum at 1 mana, that cards can't go below 1, it's not like you're going to be going crazy infinite with Arcane Luminary, unlike Sorcerer's Apprentice. So this in a way feels like a Sorcerer's Apprentice substitute, but I think a much worse one with a lot more limits essentially placed on it from a mana standpoint, both in its effect and in its initial cost, which I think really limits the utility of this card. It's still not terrible because it's just a 3 mana 4/3 with some kind of effect, and I could envision some sort of Discover deck being able to utilize this, or Elemental deck in just more of a tempo fashion almost. So I think it's a fine card. I just don't think it's a crazy one. It's 3 stars. Moving on to Oasis Ally, 3 mana secret for Mage. When a friendly minion is attacked, summon a 3/6 water elemental. I think this is a great secret. It's a nice tempo-based secret, which is sometimes what Mage needs, and you're getting a solid 4 mana minion out of it for only 3 mana, and it adds a new dynamic for Mage secrets as well, which is minion attacks, which is pretty nice too, and can really change how people have to play around Mage secrets to some extent. So this is a great secret option, and secret Mage stuff has been successful historically, so I think this is going to be a good 4-star card. Moving on to Rhyme Tongue here, 3 mana 3/4. After you cast a Frost spell, summon a 1/1 elemental that freezes. So potentially a way to build out some awkward freeze stuff if you have Frost spell support for it. Now, ultimately, I don't think this card as a sort of engine is doing enough, because the 1/1 elementals that freeze, they're just kind of sitting there on board and they're cute, but they aren't really doing a ton. You have to follow it up with all these Frost spells. Compared to other like 3 mana cards for Mage that have done this, think about the Spellburst card that deals damage, or Flame Wakers, the kind of predecessor to that card a long time ago. Those were immediately reacting to the board. This one's like more proactive, which doesn't make as much sense to me. Frost spells is a big limitation on it, so it only works with certain things. I think there's one world where it's played with Flurry, the 0 mana spell, and it's just like a good turn 3, and that's it. And beyond that, I don't know for sure that this card is worth it compared to some of the other options Mage has had in the past. So I think this is probably just a 3-star card. Next up's the Lush Water Scout here from Murloc, 2 mana 1/3. After you summon a Murloc, give it +1 attack and rush. So kind of like a magic carpet almost for Murlocs here. Very similar sort of effect. And clearly if you're playing a ton of Murlocs and you have a lot of mana, this could pop off into a nice little swing turn on your Murlocs, making them both more aggressive and helping you trade in. My concern for a card like Lush Water Scout is keeping your hand full enough of Murlocs to do that, number one, and having enough mana to do that. Like, how often are you getting to like 6-7 mana where this starts to get more interesting, I think? And you have a handful of Murlocs and you're still in the game, and are Murlocs demanding you go much faster and much harder and play a quicker game plan? This is more kind of mid-rangey, and that makes me nervous for Murlocs. It's not something we've seen succeed a ton. So I have a little bit less faith in this than a card like Magic Carpet, a card which still I never really believed in that much. It's clearly good sometimes, I know, but I still had my doubts. So I guess I'm going to be kind of low here on Lush Water Scout and say that this is only a 3-star card. I think Murlocs are just going to want to play more on curve than play from behind, which leaves this card a little wanting. Moving on to the Oasis Thrasher here, 2 mana 2/3. Frenzy, deal 3 damage to the enemy hero. So literally a River Crocolisk with some additional upside. Unfortunately, I don't really think this upside is enough. Like, yes, it's great if you're in an aggro deck and you get 3 free damage, but that's not going to happen often. Usually your opponent will clean this up in one fell swoop with 3 damage, and the Frenzy will not activate. So it's probably just a River Crocolisk most of the time, which I don't think will be good enough. There is like some buff stuff maybe in Hunter, but ultimately I still think this is only a limited 2-star card. Moving on to Refreshing Springwater for Mage. New spell, 4 mana, draw 2 cards. Refresh 2 mana crystals for each spell drawn. So in many cases, this will either be a 2 or 0 mana spell effectively for Mage, at least once you get to that 4-mana spot and can actually play it, which clearly is incredibly efficient card draw. I think it's going to be awesome whether you're in an only spell deck or even in a normal Mage deck. Even just 2 mana is cool. It's an upgrade to Arcane Intellect, essentially, and I think it'll be played a ton. This is a very strong 4-star card. All right, next up here is the Galloping Savior for Paladin. It's a secret that reads, after your opponent plays 3 cards in one turn, or in a turn, summon a 3/4 steed with Taunt. It's kind of a rat trap, but for Paladin instead, it's a 3/4 steed with Taunt, which is awkward and kind of annoying if your opponent isn't paying attention and they accidentally summon a Taunt. It could really disrupt their turn, and clearly getting a 3/4 for 1 mana is awesome, but how often is this going to trigger is the question. Now, I will say there were a lot of instances in the past where it was hard to avoid proccing a rat trap, and I think that will remain true today. I think we have a lot of cards being played in Hearthstone lately, a lot of stuff getting generated, maybe less in this expansion it seems, which is cool, by the way. So it might be a little harder, but still I think it'll be a reasonably good, more tempo-driven secret for Paladin, because you're actually looking at stats on board and maybe slowing down and denying your opponent. And even if it's not actually on board, it still might make people think, and it's important that a card like this exists. So I think this is one of the more reasonable Paladin secrets. Still iffy, but I think a 3-star card that would pop into a list here and there, if not necessarily, driving a tier 1 list. Moving on to the Knight of Anointment here, a 1-mana 1/1 minion, Battlecry, draw a holy spell. So super cheap cycle card here for Paladin. Get some stats on board, set up for some buffs and stuff, while also cycling into a holy spell. Also some potential tutor aspect where you're getting a specific holy spell that you really need. This looks great. Really cheap, efficient card draw. Bodies on board are great for Paladin. Holy spells is probably going to be most Paladin spells. So the tutor aspect may not always work, but, just grab a Libram, you're happy. Knight of Anointment seems really solid to me as a 4-star card. All right, next up is the Soldier's Caravan here. 2-mana 1/3 that reads at the start of your turn. Summon 2/1/1 Silverhand Recruits. It's another start of turn proc here on the Caravan. And, I actually think this one's a little bit more interesting than most of the Caravans. I don't know that it's necessarily going to be a great card, but it is quite a few bodies if this triggers. And the cool thing about Paladin is they have a lot of ways to potentially support or protect this minion with buffs, giving it more stats. And of course, we also have some Silverhand Recruit synergy stuff happening as well. So it seems like the upside and the payoff on this might be a little bit higher. I still think it greatly suffers from the start of turn trigger and, not the craziest stat line. I don't think it's going to be an amazing card, but it has more promise than most of the Caravans so far, which means I'm going to go ahead and give it 3 stars. Moving on to the Northwatch Commander here for Paladin. 3-mana 3/4 Battlecry. If you control a secret, draw a minion. And I like this card a lot, actually. This is a cool little secret trigger, solid base stat line, and of course a ton of upside in drawing a card. One of the problems if you're running a ton of secrets in Paladin is that they're so low cost that you can just run out of gas. And this card gives you a ton of potential fuel to keep your deck moving while developing tempo. So this seems like a solid option for a Secret Paladin. It's still one of those questions. If Secret Paladin doesn't work, obviously this is going to suck. So it's hard to sometimes review these sorts of cards. It's just all in on whether or not the archetype makes sense. But all in all, this effect is so big, and, they're setting up for long-term potential here that I still give this card 4 stars. Went ahead and skipped ahead a little bit here to the Sword of the Fallen, Secret Paladin weapon, 2-mana 1/3. After your hero attacks, cast a secret from your deck. And this is another card that solves that problem I just talked about, where if you run out of resources, you're in trouble. But this keeps things flowing and keeps the secrets coming and gives you, not a great weapon, but certainly an okay one if it's filtering 3 things out of your deck along the way to make sure your follow-up plays make a ton of sense. So that way you can mulligan for non-secrets and mulligan for cards like this and still have things flowing in the secret world. So this is another solid, awesome secret builder card. It's very susceptible to whether or not secrets work, but the potential is all here for this to be a 4-star card. All right, next up is the Soothsayers Caravan, Priest's Caravan. It's a 1/3, of course, start of your turn. Copy a spell from your opponent's deck to your hand. And I think this is just way too slow. This is probably one of the worst Caravans that we've seen, actually. It's basically a Thought Steal with a body attached, but it's delayed, it's iffy, it's not guaranteed to go off. I think that's just too risky and too slow for Priest to really get any utilization out of. It is a spell specifically, so there's maybe something going on there, but I really doubt it. I think at the end of the day, this is a really slow 2-star card. The Talented Arcanist here is a 2-mana 1/3 Battlecry. Your next spell this turn has spell damage +2. Now, as a neutral card, this is always intriguing because some classes don't have as much access to spell damage, and this is a big bump of spell damage all at once. At the end of the day, though, I think the fact that it's only limited to 1 spell, it's not great stats. Other classes have really dedicated spell damage things that are probably more consistent and just bigger payoffs. I think this is probably just a little too limited and a little bit too niche to really pop into too many decks. It's still got plenty of potential. It's just spell damage plus 2's a lot, right? And maybe you only need one spell. So I think it's like a 3-star card. It's fine. It's just not going to be amazing. Next up here is Devouring Plague for Priest. 3-mana shadow spell. Lifesteal, deal 4 damage, randomly split among all enemy minions. So nice little tempo play here, kind of like a Minefield or Dark Skies or something for Priest, a little bit more limited, but it has Lifesteal, which I think is pretty cool. I think this is a nice way to gain a ton of life, and we've seen a few like on heal effects as well for Priest already, or this might be a pretty nice way to set up your Xyrella or whatever it is. So I think with like upside from Moarg and just general use, I think this is a pretty decent option to maintain, or keep your opponent from going crazy in the early game. So I think it's a solid card for Priest. Actually, I think this one's probably 4-star option for a ton of control Priest decks. All right, moving on to the Barrens Trapper here. 3-mana 2/4. Your death rattle cards cost 1 less, and in the neutral sets, a lot of different classes could use this one. But unfortunately, I think the discount here is just not notable enough to really have to pay the 3 mana to get this card going in the first place. If you had a bunch of 1-mana stuff, you could maybe reap the discount, profit immediately, but usually you'd be setting this up for a future turn. And at 4 health, it's just not sticky enough. The stats aren't quite good enough to make this one worth the downside of having to play it first, having to include it in your deck. So as far as Death Rattle synergy cards go, this one seems rather limited to me. I think this is only a 2-star card. Moving on to the Crossroads Gossiper here. 3-mana 4/3 reads, after a friendly secret is revealed, gain +2/+2. And I think this card has some problems. Notably, you're plopping this down as a 4/3 and hoping that it gets buffed based on secrets being revealed. But you are kind of turning things over to your opponent to decide that, right? Secrets are only being revealed on your opponent's turn. So you can't really control this getting buffed immediately, which means, if they have the right answer or are able to deduce or predict your secrets correctly, this doesn't have a ton of upside. I mean, I guess, if they think it's, Oasis Ally and its counterspell, and they try to not Frostbolt, but, Frostbolt this, and they get it wrong, like they might accidentally turn this into a 6/5, which that's pretty crazy for 3 mana, I have to say. But ultimately, I think it'll backfire just as often if it works, and that may not be worth the risk. But man, it is a 6/5 really quickly, and it could snowball into even more. And there are Paladin secrets which are really cheap. I don't know. I'm actually talking myself into this card a little bit. I still think it's got consistency problems, so I'm going to limit it to 3 stars. But man, maybe keep an eye out on this one. This seems like it could be the kind of thing that snowballs on occasion and just wins games, which might make it worth running. So let's keep an eye on this one. All right, so next up here is Wildfire. This card's really surprising to me. 2 mana, increase the damage of your hero power by 1. Fire spell, and clearly enabling things like a Mordresh Fire Eye and Hero Power Mage deck, which I think has some pretty interesting pieces. Now, I will say the one downside here with Wildfire, despite enabling some of the other Hero Power Mage stuff we've seen, is that if you don't hit this early enough in the game, it's really going to limit what those other cards can do, and it's going to be less valuable over the course of a game. You're at turn 14 and you play this, it's not bad necessarily. It's fine. Maybe you get a few pings out of it. But you want to play it early in the game so you can weave in, 5, 6, 10 pings or something out of this and really net some return out of it over the course of a game and enable your other cards. And that consistency does worry me to some extent. The cool thing is, with the other cards, Mordresh and I don't remember the name, the Arcanist or whatever it is, something like that fires your hero power at all units or all enemies. Those work on their own. They don't really need extra stuff. This clearly, needs time to be good. So even though it's sort of the enabler and the whole point of those other cards, I think they, they do their own things, and, they work better certainly with Wildfire, but they could still function. You get this too late, it's not really going to do much at all. That said, I'm actually going to limit myself to 3 stars on this one, which might seem a little bit inconsistent because it's very feast or famine. When this goes off early, it's going to make all those other things shine. It'd be awesome. But when this goes off late, it's going to be kind of hard to work with. So I think there's a chance the other cards still work, and this one maybe sometimes doesn't, even though they're all in the same deck, which feel free to challenge that in the comments below. it's a reasonable thing to have a problem with. Moving on to the Ruined Orb here for Mage. 2 mana, deal 2, and discover a spell. It can go face or hit minions. It's a little bit different than something like Arcane Breath. It also doesn't have the dragon synergy. That was a great card. I think this is a pretty solid card too, frankly. I think paying the extra mana here over something like Arcane Breath isn't a huge deal. You're often weaving it into turns anyway, just looking for the next thing to do off of that Discover. So chipping away an early minion or maybe saving this till later and going face with it. Both great possibilities. And of course, discovering a spell can be absolutely fine, especially with any other sort of synergy to support that. So all in all, pretty solid 4-star card. All right, next appears the War Song Wrangler. 4-mana 3/4 Battlecry. Discover a beast in your deck. Give it all copies of it +2/+1 wherever they are. So interesting here. Another shuffle support card for Hunter. We've seen Dire Frenzy come back, and this also plays into that. You know, if you Dire Frenzy a bunch of stuff in your deck, you got a bunch of extra copies. This can help you both find one of those copies, buff it immediately, and all the other remaining copies as well. And of course, you don't have to do it with Dire Frenzy. Any other just beast in your deck, this can help you tutor it out essentially, and also buff it right away. So cool stuff like Trampling Rhino. You can set up some big damage output potentially over the course of the game or to play on curve. You are, of course, paying a penalty here as a 3/4 for 4 mana. That's understated. But given how much this card does for its cost, I think it's still worth it, right? You're keeping things flowing and potentially setting up some win conditions all together with Warsong Wranglers. This looks like could be a part of a good high-tier Hunter deck. I'm going to say it's a 4-star card. Moving on to Piercing Shot here, featuring artwork of yours truly being brutally murdered. Just absolutely shredded here. It's 4-mana spell for Hunter. Deals 6 damage to a minion. Excess damage hits the enemy hero. I actually like this card a lot. I saw some reviews that were a little less warm on it than I am. I think it's great. I think it's another great damage output tool for Hunter. There's a lot of instances where you're very happy to just like clear a minion on board and squeeze in some extra face damage as Hunter. So I think you could toss this into an aggro deck, no problem. Even if your opponent doesn't have any stuff, hit your own 1/1 and deal 5 to face. Hit your opponent's 1/1 and deal 5 to face. Those are all things you love to do as Hunter. I think this will actually be a pretty staple tool in most Hunter decks to give them a lot more reach and damage output, and sometimes removal if needed as well. I think Piercing Shot's a very strong 4-star card. Moving on here to Pack Kodo, a little 3-mana 3/3 beast for Hunter. Battlecry. Discover beast, secret, or weapon. So a bit of a flexible tool here where you can find different things for different stages or needs or game states or opponents. Which, hey, we've seen a lot of 3-mana 3/3s that discover stuff before. They've been usually pretty fine cards. And guess what? I think this is going to be another fine card. I don't think every Hunter is going to need something like this, but I think it's easily going to get tossed into a bunch of different Hunter decks as a pretty solid option. If I could give out 3.5 stars, this would be the ultimate 3.5-star card, I think. But since it's all 3s, I'm going to go ahead and bump it down to 3 just because I don't think it'll be like super core or fundamental to the deck that it's in. It'll just sort of be one of those cards you toss in and feels fine, which, for a mid to low tier deck is exactly what a 3-star card sort of symbolizes. Next up is Prospector's Caravan here. It's a 2-mana 1/3, which reads at the start of your turn, give all minions in your hand +1/+1. I think this is probably the worst of the Caravans. I think this is an incredibly slow card with a very delayed payoff, even more so than most, because the hand buff aspect is slow. And we've seen how slow some hand buff cards can be. So, I would love for a hand buff Hunter to come together, but with just how low tempo this one is, how delayed all of it is, start a turn, and then the hand buff's paying off later too, I just don't think it provides nearly enough swing or upside to be worth it. I think this is actually a 1-star card. Next up is the Death's Head Cultist, a little neutral card here, 3-mana 2/4 taunt. Death Rattle will restore 4 health to your hero. And I love cards like this, like just little early game taunts. You're happy to play, slow things down a little bit. I will say the only downside here is maybe this heal's a little bit risky if you haven't already taken 4 damage by the time you're playing this one. I think there could be instances that feels a little bit wasted. And then maybe the 2/4 is not quite enough body to make up that fact. This is probably a card you're happier to play in the mid game when you think that heal is going to stick, but then the body's even worse. So there's like this weird little gap for this one, even though I absolutely want to love it and I want it to be an amazing card. I actually have concerns that it may not be either big enough or quick enough to actually satisfy the spot it's supposed to in your deck. So I'm actually going to cap this one at 3 stars, even though I wish it were, a 5-star card that was defining for Hearthstone. Moving on to the Hog Rancher here, 3-mana 3/2 Battlecry, summon a 2/1 Hog with Rush. So honestly, this is a card you probably don't look at too closely, but I think it's kind of sort of gonna be decent. And of course, the hog here is very, very cute. It's just two solid bodies in the early game. The 2/1 rush gives you some reactivity as well, leaving behind another minion to follow up with later. I wouldn't be shocked if some decks just use this as a way to get on board early. I mean, it's kind of got that like zoo feel, token feel. I don't think it's going to be great by any means. You know, a lot of decks will have more specific or finely tuned game plans, but I wouldn't be shocked at all if this pops into some decks. So I think this is a cool 3-star neutral card. Moving on here to Wound Prey for Hunter, a 1-mana, deal 1 damage, and summon a 1/1 hyena with Rush. Seen a few cards like this in the past. This is also a spell, so it's got some spell synergy activation stuff happening for Hunter. I do think the output on this one's a little low. We're not exactly running a ton of Elven Archer plus style cards in Hearthstone all the time, and I think this will still suffer from that kind of problem where it's like sometimes you just don't really know what to do with it, even if it does have some spell synergies popping into this expansion. It's probably more important that it exists randomly off of somebody's lock and load deck than is actually being played in too many lists. So I'm gonna actually just go ahead and say this one's only a 2-star card. The Ratchet Privateer. Here's a 3-mana 4/3 neutral pirate. Battlecry, give your weapon +1 attack. And clearly this is what pirates are all about, is weapon synergy stuff. But I have to say, I don't know that the +1 attack here is enough upside for this minion. There are so many other ways to buff attacks, and then also other minions that are just a little bit higher tempo or more annoying to deal with, or just playing a little bit straighter to your game plan, that this one might not be worth it. That said, pirate aggro stuff is always a concern that it can pop up once again in Hearthstone, and this checks a lot of boxes there. So even though I don't think it's, amazing from an efficiency standpoint or totally crazy, I think it's solid enough to absolutely consider. So I have to give this one 3 stars. The Venomous Scorpion, that's how you say that. We've seen this one for a while, technically. I like this card. 3-mana, 1/3 poisonous. Battlecry, discover a spell. I actually think this will pop in a handful of decks. I think discovering a spell is really good. We've seen Vulpera, Scoundrel type cards in the past make their way into a ton of different control lists. This is also a little bit more annoying to deal with sometimes because of that poisonous aspect. The body trades up really effectively. So when you play this in the late game, it's still kind of awkward to deal with. So don't be shocked if this weird looking Scorpion makes its way into like a control priest or a control shaman, something of that sort. Those will still probably be low tier decks, and this won't be the most important card. So I think it's probably limited to 3 stars, but still shockingly interesting once again for a neutral card. Moving on to the Sunwell Initiate here, a 3-mana 3/4 with Frenzy, gain Divine Shield. So this is an awkward card for sure to deal with in some cases in Hearthstone. Like, it's just a pile of awkwardness and like 2-for-1s and 3-for-1s and stuff, because if you don't deal with it cleanly, it just kind of becomes annoying. That said, that's not a reason to run a card. So many decks have really refined game plans that are just awkward pile of stats. It's probably not convincing enough for them to actually include in their deck. So probably a monster in something like Arena, of course, but in Standard, I think it's just a 2-star card. Moving on to the Celestial Alignment here for Druid. This card is completely bonkers. 7 mana, set each player to 0 mana crystals, and then set the cost of all cards in hands and decks to 1. So you ramp up to 7, you play this, everybody's cards cost 1. Theoretically, if your cards are, much higher cost originally than your opponents, you'll be able to extrapolate a ton of extra stuff and tempo and value because you're playing bigger, costlier cards than they are for the exact same price. I think the problem here, of course, is, number one is like, how do you structure a deck to make sense with this? That's a big hurdle. But also, when you play this, you're actually going to be giving your opponent the initiative, and they're going to get to play their cheap thing before you do, unless you really cheese it out with some weird lightning blooms or something that costs 1 and only give you 1 extra mana. But anyway, most of the time, they're going to get to play their thing first. Even if they have like a 4 or 5 cost minion, they're going to start getting ahead. And if you're playing this super far from behind, they may not need much to just punish you and end the game. Hit face for lethal, whatever it is. So I think this is just a little bit too all in and crazy and demanding, and it's much more of a meme. And I'm super excited to play it, but it's really only a 2-star card. All right, so next up here is the Gruntled Patron. And I know you're thinking, oh god, not more patrons. He's a 4-mana 3/3. Frenzy, summon another Gruntled Patron. I don't think you have to worry too much. I think the things that made Patron Warrior crazy in the day aren't really existing as such today. And the Gruntled Patron will be pretty hard to actually make it work out. Just from a mana cost standpoint, stat standpoint, there's nothing here that really screams that it's going to be overpowered or go absolutely crazy. So I think this is unfortunately limited once again to a 2-star card. Or maybe fortunately limited to a 2-star card. Razor Boar here for Demon Hunter. Some more Death Rattle Demon Hunter stuff. I just have no faith in this archetype, to be honest. It's a 2-mana 2/2 beast. Death Rattle, summon a Death Rattle minion from your hand that costs 3 or less. It's, it's kind of awkward and annoying sometimes if this chain actually goes off and you summon the 3-drop that summons, a 4-drop or whatever it was. But it's just demanding a little bit too much stuff to line up well in hand and have all these pieces going together. And I still feel like Demon Hunter is going to have stronger core packages available to them than this Death Rattle package. This still feels to me like it should probably be Hunter stuff. So I don't think this feels very good to play after having actually played it. And I think it's just going to have a ton of consistency problems. I think Razor Boar is a 2-star card. Next up is Vile Call here for Demon Hunter. 3 mana, summon 2/2 demons with Lifesteal. This is another one I just don't think goes very far. A couple minions for 3 mana is fine. The Lifesteal's fine, but it's just not doing what Demon Hunter needs to do, right? This is playing a little bit of a different direction. And it doesn't support a token game plan well. It doesn't support a control game plan or an aggressive game plan all that particularly well. It's kind of like splitting itself across all these different worlds. It's like a control-y, token-y kind of deck that I just don't see Vile Call standing out compared to other options. Like, I'd rather have that neutral card we talked about earlier with a 2/1 rush probably to just get a little bit more immediate action and leave behind a bit of a better body in a 3/2 perhaps. So all in all, this just doesn't seem like an awesome card to me. I think I might actually just go ahead and throw the sucker down to 1 freaking star. I have a feeling this card will be instantly forgotten and almost never, ever played. All right, so next up's the Taro Brave. 6 mana 4/8, Frenzy, destroy a random minion, enemy minion, that is. And pretty high health total here for Frenzy minion. Could definitely be awkward to deal with. If you can't kill it cleanly in one fell swoop, you're going to have kind of a deadly shot coming right back at you. But at the end of the day, I think that's actually sort of easy to play around. You just drop a bunch of small minions if you need to, or even 1 or 2, and chip through this thing. And frankly, I don't think anybody's going to be willing to run this just because it's a pretty big commitment, and it's susceptible to all kinds of stuff, just any single target removal or that same plan. Just drop a bunch of 1/1s and go to town, and it doesn't really make a difference. So I have a feeling the Taro Brave, just in that awkward spot where he's a little bit too expensive. By the time you get 6 mana, you're looking for more like game winners and follow-ups and really powerful legendaries and stuff, and I don't think this guy fits the bill quite enough. Just a 2-star card. Moving on to the Injured Marauder here. He is a 4 mana taunt minion with a 5/10 stat line. What? But a battle cry that reads deal 6 damage to this minion. And I have to say, at first I scoffed this card off pretty hard. I didn't think this was going to be any good at all, but we've seen cards like this just make sense too many times where somebody has a way to cheat it into play. Summon a 4 mana minion from your deck sort of thing, right? We've seen those in the past. It's a 5/10. It's like, what? That's insane. Even at its base, it's still a 5/4 if you have to play it. There's Priest who might love healing this sort of card, or something else comes along where damaging your minions matters. Who knows, right? There's these weird little enablers that start to exist for cards like this. So I definitely don't want to write it off as a 2-star card right off the bat. I'm actually going to bump it up to 3 because in the next 2 years, I could very easily see some deck using this and using the sneakiness of this stat line in some way or another to cheese it out and get just a ridiculously overstatted taunt minion. So keep an eye on the Injured Marauder. Next up here is the South Sea Scoundrel. 4 mana 5/5 pirate, battle cry, discover a card in your opponent's deck. They draw theirs as well. So a little bit overstated and an interesting effect. You're going to get a card from your opponent's deck, but they're also going to get it, which sounds cool to get a card from your opponent's deck, right? The problem is if you take a good one, they're also going to get a good one. Now, I mean, if you're an aggro deck and their control deck, maybe what's good to you isn't always good to them. Like you want a minion or a pressure card and they need removal or those sorts of things. So you might say, well, I'm still going to reap more advantage here. And you might, that's true. But keep in mind, you're also just moving them through their deck. So they might also be closer to the next removal card anyway. And I think you've only gained, I cannot say the word marginal today, a marginal upside because you got a card that's probably not really that good for you either at the end of the day. The odds of them having some super awesome card for you are pretty slim. Even if you're playing another aggro deck, then you've drawn them a card they love. So in any scenario, it's probably not going to be that awesome of a net return. And you've kind of barely gained a stat advantage on this 5/5 in the meantime. So in other words, I think the downsides here and the risks are just way too high to to really make it worth it for this, slight stat bump. I think this is a 1-star card, actually. Probably 1 star. I don't think this is ever getting played. Moving on to the Burning Blade Acolyte here. 5-mana 1/1. Death Rattle summon a 5/8 demon spawn with taunt. And that thing looks super sick, by the way. So all in all, a 5-mana 5/8 taunt is pretty well statted. And if you've got any Death Rattle synergies going on, or maybe even like egg style synergies, this card's pretty nifty. We've seen some self-sacrifice stuff in Warlock that might make sense for the Burning Blade Acolyte here. The real question, of course, for this one is are you going to be willing to spend 5 mana on this play? And I think most decks really aren't going to be happy to spend 5 mana to set up some kind of play like this that is still very much stat-focused primarily. But, any Death Rattle deck that comes along and has additional upsides in their Death Rattles, this is one that might become more interesting all of a sudden. So you don't want to write a card like this off completely ever. Moving on to the Gold Road Grunt here, a 5-mana 3/7 with Taunt and Frenzy. Gain armor equal to the damage taken. So this is a pretty crazy card. A little above average stat line here, a little Fin Creeper plus stat line here. But Frenzy also potentially going to gain you a lot of armor off of this card as well. So your opponent has to be kind of careful on how to proc this Frenzy if they proc it at all. So hitting it with a 1/1 or a ping first means you'll only gain 1 armor, where if they need to trade in, a 5/5 into this, you might gain 5 armor instead from taking that 5 damage. But here's the deal, right? I think often they'll be able to hit this for like 1 or 2, and the armor upside will be pretty minimal on this Frenzy. Or if you proc this yourself, of course, with some kind of whirlwind or something, you're really not going to gain much armor either. So I think that really limits the utility of this card, is just how easily this effect is kind of played around or sometimes even ignored completely, meaning the Gold Road Grunt is unfortunately just a 2-star card. Thickhide Kodo up next here, 4-mana 3/5 Taunt Beast for Druid with Death Rattle, gain 5 armor. I actually really like cards like this. Solid stat line, big guaranteed armor upside, or guaranteed minus silences and stuff, unlike our previous card. More guaranteed, let's say. And some beast synergies out there in Druid, some taunt synergies popping into Druid. I think all that means that this is a card we need to consider as a potential threat for a couple of different archetypes, as a solid body. I think you don't feel bad playing this in many cases because of all the defensive utility that it's offering you. So I think this is actually a 4-star card. Thorn Growth Sentry is coming up here next. 2-mana spell for Druid. Summon 1/2 turtles with Taunt. A couple little bodies here. Ultimately, I don't think as exciting as something like Dreamway Guardians, perhaps. These aren't that scary. Taunt as a keyword is probably a little bit less valuable than something like Lifesteal because of the healing upside. But it's still 2 bodies for 2 mana, which is not a bad thing in token Druid lists. We've also got some taunt synergies out there as well. I don't feel like this is going to be the most important part of any sort of like taunt deck. I think you're going to want to go a little bit bigger and stickier than these. But they're still just disruptive and awkward, and they kind of remind me a little bit of like Mirror Image sometimes. It just gets in the way. So I think this is a fine card that will help be a part of some of those decks for sure. So I guess I got to give this one 4 stars yet again. All right, moving on to Pride's Fury here. 4-mana spell for Druid. Give your minions +1/+3. Now, initially, I didn't think the +3 here was especially useful, but man, after having it used against me in the Carterville stream, it looked pretty nuts. That said, I wasn't exactly playing the best deck, I don't think. So I still have some concerns that the +3 health is less valuable than perhaps, say, the flip side of this, which is kind of Arbor Up, right? Arbor Up for 5 mana seems to me like it's doing so much more than Pride's Fury here for 4, because you're getting bodies with it. You're still getting a ton of stat buff as well with the +2/+1. So it's actually more damage output as a follow-up card. So I think this card moves into a different space where it's like enabling maybe some token taunt stuff with our previous cards. Or maybe just more defensive utility if you get a taunt or 2 down. That said, I still think it's going to be a little bit more awkward to use than some of the traditional token Druid follow-up stuff we've seen. So I'm going to limit this one to 3 stars. All right, moving on here to the Dark Spear Berserker, 4-mana 5/7 with Death Rattle, deal 5 damage to your hero. And it's sort of an intriguing card, right? It's just a lot of stuff. It's a big stat line here for 4 mana, honestly. It's hard to deal with from a health standpoint. It's still plenty of pressure as well. And we've seen some stuff to like cheese out Death Rattle. So this kind of fits in Demon Hunter, perhaps. But maybe even beyond that as well. Now, it's a negative Death Rattle, right? It's not one we want to receive. But if you're playing in an aggro deck, you probably don't care about this Death Rattle necessarily. So, I don't think this is going to be a card you see often or every day, but I'm sure there's a deck somewhere here or down the road that is willing to pay the price of this damage, or maybe even enjoys this damage in something like, who knows, some kind of zoo or, Flesh Giant kind of deck or something. You can activate this Death Rattle at the right time. Might be important, and you're just happy to have the stats along the way. So this is a intriguing 3-star card to once again keep an eye on. Moving on here to Toad of the Wilds, a little 2-mana, 2/4 taunt here if you're holding a nature spell. If you're not holding a nature spell, just a 2-mana, 2/2 taunt, not that exciting. Frankly, I don't even think the 2-mana, 2/4 taunt's that exciting, particularly because it does have this condition. I mean, it's one of those cards like, yeah, if you've got nature spells, I'm sure it's okay. But I still don't know if it's going to be worth it compared to other 2-mana cards that you can run. I think you kind of have to be a nature spell deck with exactly taunt synergies that's defensive, which there's a chance that happens in Druid. I could see that happening, but it's so unreliable, so unpredictable. As cute as this guy is, I don't think he's going to be a card we see very often because he has so many limitations placed on him. I think at best here, a 3-star card, but part of me wants to go 2 stars on this one. I guess we'll still stick to 3 because at the end of the day, a 2/4 taunt's not bad. Moving on here to Fury for Demon Hunter. And it's 1-mana spell. It's a ranked spell. At a base, it's +2 attack. At 5 mana, it's +3. And at 10 mana, it's +4 attack. I actually think it's okay at its base level. It's kind of like the front half of a Twin Slice. Twin Slice is way better, of course, because you get the flexibility and sometimes the output if necessary to go for higher attack values. But once you get to 5 mana, it's +3 damage. That's pretty exciting. And then, if you manage to get to 10 mana Demon Hunter, which I don't think anybody's ever done before, you get +4 attack, all of which can help enable some of the attack-based stuff we see in Demon Hunter. I do have a concern though that this just isn't quite pumping out as much as something like Twin Slice, where you're just getting more total output from it early in the game, and sometimes you need that to make swings. So I actually have a feeling this card is going to come up a little bit short for Demon Hunter comparatively. I guess it might get played just because that's all we've got, and there's no Twin Slice in standard format anymore because I think it rotated out with core, but it still just doesn't feel like it's going to be as good. So I'm sure a lot of decks will be able to leave this one behind and not notice. I'm actually, I don't have that much faith in this. I think I'm actually going to give this 2 stars. I think it's just a little bit too limited. I didn't expect that. I thought I was going to go 3 on this, but I think it's actually 2 stars. I think this will fall short quite often. Moving into the Heckle Fang Hyena here. It's a 2-mana 2/4 beast with Battle Cry. Deal 3 damage to your hero. So, theoretically a small stat upside here alongside some downside with this Battle Cry a la Flame Imp. So, I think there's like one deck where this makes sense, which is like a Dark Lair Warlock. Theoretically Priest if they wanted to like get some guaranteed healing. But here's the deal. I don't think it's going to be good enough in either of those scenarios. I think Dark Lair Warlock has better plays like Dark Lair itself on 2 mana and playing, a slightly upsided 2-drop just to net the discount on Dark Lair isn't going to be worth it. Warlock has way better ways to activate that. So I think Heckle Fang Hyena is actually here a 1-star card that just isn't even good enough for the very limited use cases where it might be good. Moving on to Tusk Piercer here. Demon Hunter card, 1-mana, 1/2. Death Rattle, draw a Death Rattle minion. So a way to kick off the Demon Hunter Death Rattle chain of sorts, it seems. And, 1-mana cycle into a card's cool, but it's pretty limited. Now, I will say, there is a use case for Tusk Piercer. Tusk Piercer, I think, might actually make Tusk Piercer good, where Demon Hunter Death Rattle stuff is not good, and that is that you have some other Death Rattle card in your deck, just some general use Death Rattle that has nothing to do with like Death Rattle synergies otherwise, and you use Tusk Piercer to tutor out that 1 or maybe 2 Death Rattles. Just get some heal card or some other awesome card, some value card. So I wouldn't write out Tusk Piercer as a card altogether. I don't think Death Rattle Demon Hunter is going to come together. It seems too weak to me. But this as a card uniquely from that actually seems kind of intriguing. So I'm going to go ahead and give this one 3 stars, whereas if it's just for Death Rattle Demon Hunter, it would be a pretty easy 2. Moving on to Tiny Finn's Caravan here for Murlocs. Cutest card maybe in Hearthstone history. As a 2-mana 1/3 at the start of your turn, draw a Murloc. Unfortunately, it's also one of the slowest cards in Hearthstone history. Not really, but I do think it has that Caravan problem of being a little bit too delayed in the modern era of Hearthstone. Too many rush minions, too many reactive cards for this to really stick and to make a big difference. And with Murlocs, I think you need to go faster. So unfortunately, I think Tiny Finn's Caravan is at best a 2-star card. And I actually think you can make a pretty good argument that this is only a 1-star card. Is that an argument I want to make? Yeah, I'm gonna make that argument. I think this is only a 1-star card. I think this is almost super unlikely to ever see play because Murlocs need to be faster. There has to be better card draw than what Tiny Finn's Caravan can provide. It's a 1-star card. The Lushwater Mercenary here for Murlocs. 2 mana, 3/2. Battlecry, if you control a Murloc, gain +1/+1. So a 4/3 Murloc. This is the tempo Murloc we're looking for. This is what we need. We want on-curve Murlocs, creating pressure and pushing hard, not drawing one card on a delay super slowly. So yeah, I think this is an awesome Murloc support card. If there's ever going to be Murlocs, I'm sure this card will be a part of it. Just a big stat dump, and that's going to be nice. So pretty solid 4-star Murloc here with a Mercenary. The Arid Stormer is a new elemental for Shaman. That's 2/5 Battlecry. If you played an elemental last turn, gain Rush and Wind Fury, which is actually pretty nuts for 3 mana, I think. It is, of course, conditional. If you don't have that elemental, this thing's not that exciting as a 3 mana 2/5, but when you hit that elemental, that's nuts. That is going to allow you to really tidy up some early game boards for sure, just because that's a big health total and a lot of reactivity. And I think it actually holds up even pretty well into the mid game. And just quite a few stats anytime you can play this thing at all, probably in the first 5-6 turns of the game. So I like the Air Stormer quite well. You know, it's super conditional. If elementals work, it's going to be great. If they don't work, it's not going to be great. But when you have this much upside, you have to consider it and account for it in the reviews. This looks like a 4-star card. The Kindling Elemental here, 1 mana, 1/2. With a Battlecry, the next elemental you play costs 1 less. And yeah, this is a cool little way to weave in some elemental triggers and also net some discounts that persist over turns. So you can play this on 1, drop that 3-drop we just looked at on turn 2, and man, you're off to the races. That's going to be pretty amazing play. So because elementals can exist across multiple classes and archetypes, and there might be more in the future to even double down on the Kindling Elemental, I think you have to say this guy's got a lot of potential to be the perfect way to open up any kind of elemental deck or elemental synergies, therefore making it a 4-star card. Unbelievable. Who could have guessed? All right, next up's the South Coast Chieftain here. 2 mana, 3/2 Murloc for Shaman. Battlecry. If you control another Murloc, deal 2 damage. And once again, a great tempo-based Murloc. It can go face. It can take trades to make sure you can help stabilize your Murloc board there. And alongside all the other Murloc Shaman stuff we got, this looks like it could be a pretty key piece of that environment. So I have to say, once again, it's a 4-star card. All right, so next up here is Niru Fireblade. This one's, man, I love this card so much. He's a 5 mana 5/5. Battlecry, if your deck is empty, open a portal that fills your board with 3/2 imps each turn. And this portal actually reads at the end of your turn. So it was confirmed the portal's correct. You're going to get the imps at the end of your turn only, not at the end of your opponent's turn, which means if they remove them, you will not be able to attack with them on your turn. Now, here's what the imps look like. They're super awesome. The finger gun imps are hilarious. And that makes this kind of like the old Quest Warlock reward. It's sort of like a, Chef Nomi reward as well, without, quite the stats, but more persistence over time. And, I tease we might be getting a big reward for this empty deck Warlock. This is it, and I love it beyond belief. Like, I'm going to try to play this deck every day of my life because I liked old Quest Warlock a ton, and this seems super fun. That said, I don't actually think it's going to be super competitive. Which I say that, but here's the thing. I actually think the empty deck cards for Warlock are going to be pretty good. Like I think the AoE is pretty solid. The lifesteal hit a minion dude's pretty solid. Even that 1 mana 6/6 taunt we talked about earlier is pretty solid. I think those are the reason to run the deck. And I think you probably toss in Niru Fireblade, but I wonder how often he actually contributes to winning the game. And it's not just the high quality cards you're playing until you get to that empty deck. In other words, the 10 cards or less conditional ones seem to me to be better than Niru Fireblade himself. I could almost envision a world where you run the 10 cards or less ones and have something like Envoy Rustwicks to increase your deck post-fatigue as opposed to Niru Fireblade. Maybe they all go together, right? You could play Niru and Rustwicks together and try to set up both. So I don't want to count out Niru. I hope he's good. And I'll say, like, I think having a board full of imps every turn is really good. It's not quite as much pressure as Nomi, but not every deck is going to have the ability to just keep clearing that. But can you stay alive through fatigue. You know, you got that one lifesteal card, you got some taunts to complement. Maybe you can stay alive through fatigue long enough to make that happen. I was kind of, you know, it'd be nice if this was like something that prevented fatigue, like it popped up out of your deck as opposed to on board, but it appears it's going to be a dormant thing on board. It's not going to like prevent you from taking fatigue. So it's, you know, you've got 6 imps then if this is taking up a spot on board. That's 18 damage if they can stick and attack. Your opponent clears a few, you attack with a few over a few turns. Like it's possible, but it sure seems like it's going to be hard. But if you're doing it in combination with everything else, maybe you just toss this in just because. I don't know. I'm going to say 3 stars on this guy. I think it's actually pretty likely he goes lower than that, and he's kind of forgotten even in a fatigue deck. But man, I sure want him to be good. He'd be so much fun. So moving on here to Altar of Fire. This is another support card for this empty deck Warlock. We've got Fatigue Warlock here. And it's 1 mana, destroy the top 3 cards of each deck, which I think no one wanted because Ticketus is already annoying people so much. This one is symmetrical, so you're destroying your own cards, which of course you don't care if you're trying to get to an empty deck. A couple of these can push 6 cards out of your deck, which can really help you accelerate, which, by the way, we don't talk about this much, but if you've got a card like Niru Fireblade that you're playing towards, these are kind of risky that they could destroy your big payoff cards. So do you wait for Niru to go off? Do you just sometimes lose Niru because you don't really care? I don't know. How do you say Niru? Niru? That's another question that we all need to know the answer to. This card doesn't seem worth it, whereas like Soul Rend does. And it's so funny because I think I'm opposite for most of you. When I've read your guys' opinions, a lot of people love Altar of Fire and hated Soul Rend. Soul Rend is the card that deals 5 and destroys cards for everything that dies. I like Soul Rend because it's got a payoff, and I'm destroying cards, but I don't care because I'm getting this really efficient AoE, and I'm, you know, moving towards the game plan. You guys like this one because you're destroying your opponent's stuff. I don't care as much about destroying my opponent's stuff. If they're not going, I don't want to get into this whole if they're not going to fatigue thing again. It doesn't matter. It can kind of matter. There's informational advantage, and if you're destroying all their cards, certainly it can matter. So if you really commit to this game plan, I guess in that sense, Altar of Fire is better than just a generalized like make your opponent destroy a card in their deck sort of thing. So I do think this is more important than Gnome Feratu, for instance, because this is 3 cards. It's playing towards this fatigue game plan. You probably need your opponent to be fatigued as well. So the symmetrical aspect is pretty nice. So maybe, yes, this is indeed worth it in a fatigue Warlock deck. You probably have to run this. It's better than the general destroy your opponent's stuff cards. And we already know Ticketus can work really well in that regard. He's got a huge body. You can play him twice. That makes Ticketus worth it. I think this is probably worth it too because of all the follow-up. So yeah, let's go ahead and give Altar of Fire another 3-star option. I still don't think it's as good as the actual payoff cards or the like, you know, setup with payoff like Soul Rend, but it's still pretty nifty tool. Moving on here to Conditioning for Warrior. It's the ranked spell. It's hand buff. It gives +1/+1, then upgrades to +2/+2, and finally +3/+3, which I have to say, man, at the later stages, give minions your hand +3/+3 is a pretty big hand buff. It's still, unfortunately, though, hand buff, and I don't know if it's going to be good enough. I think often you'll probably want to play this at its base level or at its a mid-tier level because you've got some good mid-game stuff that you want to pay off your hand buff. But I still think it's like you've got like those 5-mana cards that you really want to hand buff, and then you don't really want to play this on 2, and you don't really want to play it on 5 because you want to play the 5-mana card. You want to play this on turn 4 or something, but it's not upgraded yet. So it's probably just going to be awkward yet again. And then, you know, as the game stretches on, you may not have as many cards in hand, and the stats may not matter as much. So the fact that this upgrades is probably not really that useful. Unfortunately, I think that means this is probably only a 2-star card. Moving on to Apothecary Hellbrum here. 4-mana 3/2 rogue legendary. Battlecry Death Rattle add a random poison to your hand. And clearly we've seen a few poisons. By the way, Nitro Boost poison confirmed to 2 mana. We haven't talked about that yet, but that news is officially out. So, you know, Deadly Poison, Nitro Boost Poison, Paralytic Poison, the poison we reviewed earlier in this video, quite a few poisons. I think Wild probably even has more. And yeah, that's cool. I think that's actually, you know, just get some stuff in hand and play a body is fine. Unfortunately, the stats on this are pretty weak, and the poisons are actually on average now a little bit expensive at 2 mana. So this doesn't get exciting until like a turn or 2 down the road, right? If you're playing Hellbrum and then like a Shank or another weapon and then some poisons, it seems like it's going to take a long time for this play to actually pan out and be worth it. So I have some concerns that this is going to be a tad too slow to get going compared to other cards, which are probably just higher tempo. And investing in all these poisons in a weapon again seems kind of risky to me. So sure enough, I don't think I like Helbram as much as most people. I think this is only a 3-star card for me. Moving on to Serena Bloodfeather here for Priest. Pretty crazy card. It's 1/1, choose an enemy minion, steal attack and health from it until this card has more. So Serena looks like will steal attack and health independently until she has more than the enemy minion, which is frankly kind of hard to sort out sometimes. I mean, you obviously can count it out. There's probably some rule or heuristic here to help us sort this out too. Basically, like half of the minion's health is going to go away, or half of its stats, and then I guess you probably have to round up if it's an odd number, right? So like 5 goes down to 2.5. You round up to 3. So it's gonna go down. It's gonna lose 3, so it's gonna go down to a 2/2. So like a 5 health, right? You're taking it down to 2, and you're going to 3 basically. So she'd have 3, and it would have 2. Sometimes she'll kill minions, I guess, too, if they have 1 health, and she pushes them to 0. Or if they have 2 health, yeah, she'd only push them to 1, so she wouldn't kill them. So a removal on something with super low health, like a swing of sorts, stats wise. Otherwise, ultimately though, I don't know if she makes up enough difference. Like the idea is like you're kind of damaging stuff almost so that you can finish it off with like another card or a trade or another spell. But I don't know if that's that exciting to like develop a minion that's half the size of your opponent's stuff or a little more than half the size of your opponent's stuff. Is that really that intriguing to me? I feel like people seem more excited about this card than me, and I don't know why. I'm going to read some quick thoughts on this. I don't know. I'm just not as convinced on Serena Bloodfeather. I think taking half the stats or roughly half the stats off something doesn't really seem that valuable to me. I'd rather just kill it and play my own thing as opposed to like this half measure of sorts. So I'm actually going to say Serena is only a 2-star card. Even though most people are giving it like 4+ stars. I'm not buying it in. Maybe I'll see it in action again. I saw it played against me. It didn't feel that good. And I'll believe in it more later. Oh, that was it. That was the final card. Man, I ended on a low note there. So a lot of stuff. Man, so many cards. This review season's been weird. So many fewer reviews and man, just cards all at once here at the end. So anyway, of course, if you made it through that entire video, thank you for your patience. First off, really appreciate you sticking around. Share your thoughts on these cards. I have a feeling this expansion's review scores are going to be weird. We've had way more 4-star cards than normal, I think. Only a handful of 1-star cards. The bottom of cards definitely seemed higher than before. There's not a bunch of unplayable garbage, which has been a bit of a trend. We may have to adjust what 1-star cards really look like. Because used to we'd get a bunch of like, filler card garbage, and I feel like we don't get that anymore. Like even the kind of random neutral cards feel better than they used to, right? Like when this is one of the worst cards in the set, it's not bad. So we have to adjust what 1-star looks like in the future, because I don't think we had too many 1-star reviews. But a handful of 5s, a lot of 4s, of course, a lot of 3s as always, a lot of 2s. So yeah, anyway, cool set. I'm excited to give this all a shot. So thanks for hanging out. Share your thoughts on these cards and more in the comments below. Stay tuned for some like patch notes and other discussion stuff coming soon. We also have theory crafting coming soon, so you're going to be playing a lot of these cards in the next day or so and go from there. So thanks again for watching. Thanks for hanging out this review season, and until next time, game.